I finished the Fallout Prime show and absolutely loved it. Yes, I'm a real Fallout fan, and yes, I still very much enjoyed it. However, it got my brain meats churning like the inside of that gulper. Back in 2021, Amazon Studios bought the rights to Mass Effect, but since then, we've had complete radio silence. Would the success of Fallout give Amazon Studios the push they need to try other video game adaptations? You better believe it. It's like asking if Amazon likes printing money. So that wasn't the question that slurped my mind. What I was really wondering is what the show would look like. What would be the best approach, and if it would or could be better than the Fallout series. So I set out to answer those questions by replaying the Legendary Edition and Andromeda. Though Andromeda was particularly difficult, check out my reactions below. The ultimate conclusion I arrived at might surprise you all and is 100% fact. I don't want to hear anything different. But just for a little experiment, leave your opinion below on whether you think the Mass Effect TV series has the potential to be better than the Fallout series, and what direction you'd take it and why. Oh, howdy partner. Did you know Magic the Gathering has released a new set that's prettier than a $5 bill?
There it is! It's beautiful! Take your hat off, boy!
Calm down now. Though these cards can be exchanged for goods and services, you're going to want to add them to your collection. Outlaws of Thunder Junction brings with it new cards and new mechanics, like Plot, which lets you get up to no good. You also have cards like Oko the Ringleader, who's as bad as an Australian trying to impersonate a cowboy. Notice the 3 different styles of card, including this here wanted poster treatment. So if you want to join the greatest heist in the multiverse, to steal a cute fiery varmint and have some fun with your friends, check the link below. First, let's talk about the potential structure of the show. Amazon ultimately chose to set Fallout after the events of the game, so 2296, 15 years after New Vegas, and 9 years after Fallout 4. They also chose to set it within the same universe, not separate it into its own timeline like Marvel has with the MCU. So yes, the events of New Vegas happened, and yes, a short time after it, Sandy Shores gets destroyed. This was confirmed by Todd Howard. Fallout is all about civilizations rising up and being cast down because war never changes. So don't shed a tear for the NCR, they're still around. The Mass Effect show has 4 options. The first is to set it after the events of the trilogy or Andromeda in a similar way to the structure of Fallout, a continuation of the universe. The next option is to set it during the events of the games, so seeing Shepard or Ryder's journey play out. The third is to make a prequel journey, perhaps the First Contact War or Shepard's rise to N7 Agent. Finally, the fourth option is to have it follow the Mass Effect lore, but the show would be a standalone adventure outside of the events of the game. All of these choices need to consider both an existing fan base and those who have had little to no experience with the games, essentially be friendly to new audiences. I want to dive into these choices, but I need to make my bias clear from the start as to avoid contaminating this thought experiment too much. I prefer that the show starts at the same place as Mass Effect 1 and follows Shepard's journey. These are the games that I and many others resonated with on a personal level, and seeing that come to life would bring me so much joy. It's also the most difficult to adapt pathway, one that could get the most wrong. It could completely destroy any chance of a high Rotten Tomatoes audience score. We saw how some of the public treated Fallout, even though it was so well made. The idea of a tiny bit of lore not aligning the way they wanted sent them spiraling into resentment for, quote, retconning lore. It's inevitable that Mass Effect would receive at least some backlash for not aligning the exact way that some fans want it to. This is more so because it is Mass Effect. What made Mass Effect so memorable and beloved was the breadth of choice that carried over 3 games. How you treated others, how you completed missions, how you built your character, and who lived and died. Your experience won't be the same as your friends, so how do the writers translate this into live action, which has 0 audience interaction? If they wanted the show to be one-to-one faithful to the source material, they would still need to choose Paragon or Renegade outcomes. They would need to choose how Shepard approaches missions. Does he kick someone out of a window, or does he negotiate? Does he shoot Rex? Does he choose booty over bro? This is also assuming that Shepard is one person with one look, one gender, one class. Is Shepard a soldier, an adept, an engineer? Is Shepard a male or female? How do you make these choices? Because ultimately there will be people who resonate with one choice and not with the others, myself included. I hate to admit this because I no doubt will be ostracized for it, but I simply would not be able to believe Shepard as a female. My journey and experience with Shepard is that he's male. It's not saying I'm right, and many people will see Shepard as a female, but I'd be lying if I say I wouldn't be disappointed if he was portrayed differently. So moving forward, I'll call Shepard a he, but that's just because it's easier for me. Feel free to continue to think she's a she if you prefer that. That's the beauty of Mass Effect, it's your story. Then comes the classes. How does Shepard fight in this show? The original default Shepard in Mass Effect 1 is a male soldier. So if you think the choice should be made based on the original idea of Shepard, then it would be said male soldier, which is backed up by the original code. We also see Shepard highlighted as a soldier during the cinematic trailer for Mass Effect 2. However, we can't just focus on what the defaults were. They had to set a standard after all. If you chose a biotic class in Mass Effect 1, Kaidan mentions that his implants don't peak as high as yours. There are a few instances of Shepard using biotics, but ultimately in most cutscenes, he uses a pistol and shields when a true biotic would be using biotics and barriers. Then comes the tech specializations. The only major nod to picking engineer comes at the end of the Omega DLC for Mass Effect 3, where if you're an engineer, you have an extra dialogue option. Something I wish they did more of for each class.
Rerouting the power to maintain the other systems. It's commendable, but it might take a while.
Maybe if I was a stupid grunt.
So I think it's safe to say that it wouldn't be a surprise to many if Shepard was the default male soldier. Some might be annoyed, Kotaku would see ad revenue dollar signs in their eyes and make some articles. Some people will whine, but fans would accept it, and the majority of fans would prefer it. But the problem is, even if it's an overwhelming majority, not everyone will be happy with that choice. That's the nature of choices. You don't want to see the one you made being wrong. So if Shepard is a soldier, which for those who don't know is a class primarily focused around weapon combat and peak physical training, Amazon Studios would have the opportunity to highlight the power of biotics with companions like Liara, something that can be introduced slowly to the audience. Kaidan can kick off the introduction as he's able to show the audience both combat engineering and biotics, which naturally will come up during the first combat mission on Eden Prime. Let's hope the audience doesn't expect Jenkins to live a long and happy life. Shepard can then show off his leadership skills. Liara, use Singularity over there. Kaidan, hack the door, and so on. I actually don't mean that at Eden Prime because you get Liara a lot later, but you know what I mean. Whereas if Shepard was an adept, he would have to be an extremely powerful one, which lore-wise is a lot more devastating than they show in the games. The ability to create singularities inside of people and tear off their flesh might blow the CGI budget as well, and not leave much room to show just how skilled Shepard really is. He's meant to be just a human that overcomes insane odds, but as a soldier, a vanguard, or even a sentinel, there would be a lot of room to make him shine in combat. But this is just my opinion. You see, this one choice has a lot of implications to how the show would play out, but what about Paragon or Renegade choices? I think people would overall expect Shepard to make Paragon choices. Renegade would be a lot of fun if the actor can pull it off, be ruthless but ultimately still likable, similar to the ghoul, Cooper Howard, in Amazon's Fallout. It's a lot safer to have Shepard be the beacon of hope and justice. Do remember that a lot of the Renegade choices for Shepard in Mass Effect 1 were extremely xenophobic. Granted, this is because of the First Contact War, but somehow I don't think Amazon would want their hero to potentially be labelled a racist, even though that alien was
a big stupid jellyfish.
So the writers would need to handpick and rewrite dialogue outcomes to suit the nature of live action. I mentioned before that all of this is if they want to be one-to-one faithful to the source material, but will they? Can they be? Naturally, these things would need to be streamlined. Even if they wanted to make each game a season, Mass Effect 1, if you only focus on the Golden Path, which wouldn't do it justice, is a 16-hour game. A lot would need to be cut back, with Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3 being nearly double that. Here's the thing though, a lot of that is gameplay. If you were to remove the gameplay and cut the games into just cutscenes and important moments, there would only be about 7 hours of relevancy in Mass Effect 1. So it's starting to look a lot more doable in one season, faithfully, without cutting important story moments out. If it's not faithful to the source, well, we all know what happens to video game adaptations when that happens. Halo followed its own path, and look at that failure. So I've done a lot of talking about the trilogy, but what about Andromeda? let me just cut the fat of this video by at least half an hour. Andromeda will not and should not be done. That's it. Moving on. Oh, you want an explanation? Okay, fine. But I'm going to keep it short. The reason is that Andromeda is not fleshed out. It abandons a lot of the story and lore by its very nature of abandoning the Milky Way. It also ends abruptly. Yes, it could mean there's more freedom to write after the fact, but as a starting point, it has a lot of explaining to do that doesn't naturally get covered in the storyline, which progresses quite narrowly with the assumption you already know all about Mass Effect. Not only will new viewers with no previous experience with the franchise be introduced to new technology, characters, and backstory, they would then have to be introduced to a new galaxy. The story's pacing doesn't suit the screen. I won't go into it now, but you can check out my video below for those reasons. Also, let me just kick the elephant in the room right in the face. Andromeda isn't as universally loved. Yes, it has some diehard fans that will sodomize me in the comments, but it's such a tiny portion of people, so I think I can take it. The game receives such backlash that I can't imagine that there would be many writers or directors that would want to take up the challenge. The same people that would punch me right in the throat for saying this would be just fine with a trilogy adaptation, but the same can't be said about Andromeda haters getting an Andromeda adaptation. If a Mass Effect show was announced and they focused on Andromeda, the storm wouldn't subside for a long while. I also believe even new fans simply wouldn't enjoy it as much as an entry point. Rather, it just doesn't have the same mass appeal effect as Shepard.
It's a joke. To break the ice? Get it? Warm welcome?
So ultimately, I enjoy Andromeda, but if they were to follow the events of any hero, it should be Shepard. Though, feel free to slap me in the comments. So we discussed following the events of the games, but what about following on from the events of the games? Well, I can confidently say that Mass Effect 4 will be set after the events of 3. Yes, it is Mass Effect 4 rather than Mass Effect 5, just as Fallout New Vegas is not Fallout 4. Andromeda is its own game, confirmed by the devs. PR manager Chris Presley said, "To call Andromeda Mass Effect 4 or ME4 is doing it a disservice and seems to cause a lot of confusion here. Most likely Mass Effect 4 will get its own official title anyway. My vote is for Mass Effect Rise of Conrad Werner." So how do I know that Mass Effect 4 will be set after Mass Effect 3? Well, the trailer shows Liara after the events of 3. It's that simple. Liara is over 100 in the trilogy and Asari lived to around a century, so the next Mass Effect could be set anywhere from 1 to 900 years in the future. That also means that somehow with new technology, the Andromeda initiative could be brought into the fold, giving fans what they want, a sequel to 3 and Andromeda in one. So how would this work for a show? Well, strictly speaking, unless it's made in parallel with Mass Effect 4, how can it work? It would need to fill in the gap between the events of 3 and 4, or it would need to be a show about a game that has yet to be developed, in which case it would be an odd starting point for the show. Then it runs the risk of the game releasing and invalidating the show, or vice versa. The events that happen need to be referenced, so you can't make a story in the future without doing so. There seems like there would need to be a little bit too much coordination needed to continue the canon story on. Fallout works as a continuation of the story because war never changes. It can be new characters set in a relatively easy to understand universe. It's still Earth, be it a different timeline than ours, but post-apocalyptic Earth is a theme that's easy to move the story forward with. It's quick to explain. Bombs dropped, people fled to shelters, hunky-dory, let's start the drama. Whereas Mass Effect, you have to explain so much, like how humans got to where they are, the mannerisms and differences around 25 new alien races, and more. All of this needs to be doled out gradually over the course of a few episodes. The way the original Mass Effect title introduced you to a lot of new lore was to dump you on the Citadel, and that was notorious for slowing the pace of the game down, and also that was where a lot of people dropped off. It was a necessary evil that could have been handled better narratively, but it was still great for 2007. You also have the codexes, and as amazingly narrated as those were, they wouldn't work for live action. So following the structure of Mass Effect 1 seems to be the best way to introduce new people to this lore, rather than continuing on from an endpoint and explaining everything that's happened up to then. A few of you are saying, well, it doesn't need to do that, it can just follow other characters in their journey. Well, that's point 4, a standalone adventure set within the lore, but outside of the game, aka no need to be technically canonical. This will give the writers the most creative freedom, using existing characters to explain another story. like how through extended writing it was explained that Liara retrieved Shepard's body and worked with Cerberus to bring him back, or it could be a spin-off like Mandalorian was to Star Wars, as in new characters with different stakes. Is this what people want to see though when they hear live action Mass Effect is coming? It's unlikely, but perhaps it's a good approach as both don't require multiple choices to be turned into one and made canon, and it won't piss off any fans who had pre-established ideas of Shepard's journey. But that is playing it safe, most likely too safe. This is better than no Mass Effect as we can at least see the universe realize, but it's not what people flock to Amazon Prime for. An example of point 4 would be to have just normal soldiers going about their lives during the events of the trilogy, and occasionally they run into or observe Shepard and the crew doing incredible things. That way the writer can avoid making choices. The B Squad. Knowing that all these incredibly interesting events are happening or are about to happen could drive a knife into the heart of fans if not done correctly. And if the story is not as compelling, that would be like they twisted the blade and then taken a dump on your forehead. It would be an extremely fine line to walk. The same goes for a prequel. I think the First Contact War would be an interesting starting point for the show. You can introduce humanity to aliens, and naturally the drama that comes with conflict would unfold. The show could slowly introduce new themes so that old and new fans alike would be interested. As much as I hate to admit it, this would be the safest bet. There's enough lore there to have the framework. There's enough of a future already written to direct the prequel story in a way that won't annoy lore advocates. There still could be new characters, stories to follow, and stakes. If it's done successfully, they could even eventually move the timeline forward onto Shepard becoming an N7 agent, then onto the events of Mass Effect 1. This wouldn't be my first choice for the Mass Effect show, but I have to admit it would be the easiest one to pull off. So those are the 4 possible directions for the show. Could these have potential to be better than Amazon's Fallout? It all comes down to execution. You can love or hate The Mandalorian, but what the director did with the show was groundbreaking in a lot of ways, even down to encasing the stage in LED backdrops, making it so even the Mandalorian's shiny armor would show the right reflections. If the Mass Effect show is given the same love and respect it deserves, I imagine new filming technologies would need to be developed. A lot of what made the Fallout show great was how true it was to the setting. It all looked fantastic and there was so much from the game that was used in the show, even down to specific food items. That kind of love and care for the source material showed that fans and developers really did help produce it. Mass Effect would need the OG writers and game directors helping with the project to ensure it sticks to the source. And as many of you know, some have moved on to other roles and some are building a game called Exodus. However, Michael Gamble is leading the team making Mass Effect 4 as their game director. He worked on the originals. He is joined by an EP, art director and creative director that are all trilogy veterans as well. If they were all somehow involved, as well as other key staff who have moved on, like the cinematic director John Ebenger, who worked on some memorable cinematic moments in the trilogy, then I would have much more confidence that it will be done justice. The cast would be incredibly important as well. I discussed my thoughts on this with my friend Duty, and he mentioned that you could get Seth Green playing Joker, and he's right. The authenticity would drive people wild. I wouldn't mind if Mark Meir, the original voice actor of Shepard, played him as well. So if all things are equal and Mass Effect gets the same love and care as Fallout, does it have the potential of being a better show? Okay. Unfortunately, no matter how much I wish it to be so, my answer seems to always arrive at no, it won't. The absolute best outcome, the fairyland unicorn situation, would be that the writers, casting, actors, set designers, directors, and so on absolutely nail it. Everyone is happy with the choices they make narratively, everyone is happy with the casting, everyone is happy with the era it's set, everyone is happy with the pacing, everyone's happy with the tone, and even in that situation, even in that incredibly unlikely situation, the overall narrative is still known by the audience. If it's a prequel, you won't know exactly what's going to happen episode to episode, but you'll know how the story will resolve. If it's Shepard's journey, you know exactly what's going to happen, even if watching it play out will be extremely entertaining. Fallout has the benefit of being able to tell its own tale outside of the games and still feel extremely connected. It's able to tell that story and not invoke disappointment and anger from the fans, besides the rabid ones of course, but that's with any franchise. The Mass Effect trilogy is resolved. The Fallout storyline is not. The Fallout TV series can take a point in the future and continue the story on. It's not the same for Mass Effect for all the reasons I mentioned before. At least it won't be as smooth of an adaptation from video game to live action. That's assuming the perfect unicorn situation, but it's far more likely that things just won't be perfectly executed. For its flaws, the fact that Fallout turned out the way it did is nothing short of incredible. My faith in Hollywood, and I'm sure a lot of yours, has waned when it comes to video game or any nerdy media adaptations. So to see them get one right gives me hope they can do it again, but really the most likely outcome is that we get a mediocre to maybe decent Mass Effect adaptation that is filled with compromise to the point it doesn't feel like your Mass Effect. Do you really want to be saying the Mass Effect show isn't what I consider canon? I don't. So maybe it's for the best that the rights to Mass Effect gather dust somewhere in the vast shelves of Amazon's head office, handled by top men. What do you think? Agree or disagree with me? Let me know below. This is my opinion, so ultimately I'm open to discussion. Much love to all of you out there, and I hope you get everything you want. Ciao, friends.